Welcome to Running the Show, a podcast exploring the intersection of running and business. It's time for another roundtable in the month of March, where Emma, Evan, and myself, Drew, discuss what is going on in the running industry, things that interest us right now. That includes the lawsuit around the Brooklyn Half Marathon and marathons. It's the Josh Kerr talking about prize money and pay at World Indoors, Michael Johnson's track league, bonuses at the Paris Olympics, and Lululemon's Further project. As always, if you like what you hear today, please like, subscribe, recommend to a friend, rate the podcast. Whatever you can do, we really appreciate the support. And also send us things that you're interested in. We'd love to explore that in a future episode and maybe do a deep dive on it as well. Enjoy.
Now that we are done with our off-the-cuff banter that will truly get cut out, we can dive into the roundtable episode for March. As always, my name is Evan. I'm joined by Drew Hartman. Hi, Drew.
Hi, Evan.
And Emma Cortez. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Evan.
People can't see you waving unless they're watching the video, but I appreciate you waving on the podcast. We're back with another roundtable, this time for March. It is St. Patrick's Day, and I was trying to think of some clever way to say we're talking about different types of green things like new or like money things, but we usually talk about stuff that is the intersection of business and running, and we're going to continue talking about that today. Drew, can you lead us off with the first thing we're going to talk about, which is naming controversy in running races, because we feel like you have the most actual expertise with some of these, what do you say, quote unquote, soft trademark things. Before you dive into that, I'm just going to quickly talk about the agenda so people can stay listening after the first breakdown that takes the first hour or 45 minutes of the show. We're going to talk about the Brooklyn Half Marathon naming controversy, Josh Kerr and prize money at World Indoors, and why throwing a dart at a dartboard is better than running around an indoor track. Michael Johnson's track league, the Paris Olympic bonuses, and Lululemon's brand new event. Drew, why would it be confusing if I was planning on running the Brooklyn Half Marathon and I went to the Brooklyn Half Marathon and my favorite search engine, signed up for a race, and I found out I signed up for the wrong race? Why would that be confusing? Why would that even happen? And what is going on here?
Well, I can share a personal anecdote around this, where in the function I have for work and planning out go-to-market calendars and kind of building these work back schedules of all the things we have to assemble to be successful as a brand, in looking at race schedules through the spring and summer, I also made the mistake that something we were going to do was for the other Brooklyn half, and it had to be corrected. So if it could happen to somebody who works in the industry, it could happen to anybody. So Evan's alluding to, right, there's two races in Brooklyn that offer half and full. One is a New York Roadrunners race within their calendar and organization. The other one is NYC Runs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the thing that also makes this confusing as well, and I think everybody here can note this, since the sponsorship on these races changes regularly, it's not like saying, oh, it's the United Half, right? In terms of the one that goes on in Manhattan. That's been a legacy race. I think the New York Roadrunners half has been sponsored by Scotiabank, RBC, and it's changed enough. So, right, the naming of Brooklyn half is challenging. And you were alluding to this, Eric. Oh my gosh. I'm going to edit that out. Well, that sucks.
That's fine. It's not the first time. It's not going to be the last time.
I'm in too much of a work mode with talking about this shit with a coworker. Okay, so the big thing around trademark litigation or any kind of lawsuits that are surrounding things like this is confusion. To think that somebody would confuse one entity with another, and obviously it's built on financial implications. The challenge with this is there's the formal trademark.
Your audio is cutting again.
I have like area mic. Is it better?
Do you have like heating or cooling going on?
I do.
It might be
good about that. Better, maybe?
The challenges are just give like a sample sentence.
Okay. So the challenges of this include, okay, so in trademark protection and trademark law, there are, and this is legal information, not legal advice. I have to say that. I went to law school. That's the one thing I remembered most, is that I'm not authorized to give legal advice. So you can pursue a trademark, meaning that you have legal protection for a name of something or a logo or, some kind of identifier of your brand. And there is the ability to say, for this classification of goods and services, we have protection on this thing. So Nike is a great example. Adidas is another example for shoes, clothes, applications, right? All of the ways they want to use it, saying that nobody else can use this under our nose and deceive customers and think that we're related. This gets really challenging with like proper nouns and with locations. And this is something you brought up before, Evan, that does this preclude people from being able to create a Brooklyn anything, a Brooklyn half, a Brooklyn 5K, a Brooklyn 10K, because it's location specific, and how else do you indicate what's going on? Not everybody can call it the pay marathon, right? That makes it challenging. I don't know if they have if they have a trademark on Brooklyn half or Brooklyn marathon. But another way that you can acquire distinction, is the phrasing they use, is by showing over the course of time that you are associated in the public with a certain like reputation. So there is state to state, there are like different time periods for that. Sometimes it's 5 years of operation using the said phrase. Sometimes it's 10 years or whatever. So there are other ways that you can say we're known for this without having that legal filing entity that you can stand on. So that makes it super challenging here, right? You have to look at how long you've been in business and how long you've been using it and the way you've been presenting it, and how somebody, a new player in the space, NYC runs, how they are asserting this as well, and citing cases like this where somebody maybe registers for the wrong race. But that's kind of a long and short thing there. How do you two feel about those kinds of things?
While you were talking, I was pulling up the lawsuit to see some of the colorful language. And one of the things you kind of talked about was NYRR. When your organization has reached a acronym that you can say relatively fast, even though it has 2 back-to-back letters like NYRR, you have kind of made it in the space. And a lot of the litigation and like the complaint that they submit and the summons is establishing that, they've been an organization for over 40 years. They're vital to the community. The Brooklyn half marathon sells out, right? And many runners were confused and registered for the wrong race. And I feel like if there was unlimited entry, or the entry was like up to 100,000 people, and people that accidentally signed up for the alternative, the NYC runs Brooklyn half, if they didn't angrily email NYRR and say, what the heck, I thought I registered for your race, this probably wouldn't happen. But because it's a limited event and NYRR has to have such a strong arm in the community and have like literally every race in the New York City area, I feel like that's the little wrinkle or like the specifics of the situation getting involved. A lot of the complaints and stuff that that I was reading before as well were just trying to hype up how valuable NYR is and how good of events they put on. And the New York Times has said XYZ, and it makes sense to me why you should defend a trademark that they trademarked, but I also see it as really murky with geographically locking out anybody else from coming up with a name, because if it is the New York City Marathon that NYR is also trademarked, you cannot have another New York City Marathon because they will send a cease and desist your way. That also means it's going to be a lot harder of a time for some small race organizer to grow organically a really big race if they have to name it something that is not a noticeable name or something to go along with and something that is recognizable. So it's weird. It's murky. I feel like because in the past couple of years, we're maybe in this like running boom, race boom post COVID and really seeing that resurgency of races. Maybe stuff like this will happen with some other like small mom and pop races that just use placeholder names in the past couple of years that maybe grow in popularity, but they're growing in popularity because people are Googling to sign up for their local race and then registering for the wrong race and then emailing in. And then maybe in that case, there'll be some, lawsuits like this that kind of set the trend for stuff. Emma, what do you think?
I think, just now I can't remember. I think it was Drew, you mentioned, where like all these different, I can't remember if this was pre-recording or post, this is actually recorded, but mentioned about how like there's different sponsors of, races, and that can change throughout the years. And so I just think like from that standpoint, it's interesting because then if you do have this lawsuit that goes through and then, there is like the trademark of like the Brooklyn half through NYRR, then yeah, exactly to your point, Evan, how do you uplift these smaller road races, local races, because then they're like, okay, well, for example, in Toledo, Ohio, there is the Churchill's half marathon, which is a local grocery store. And they've been sponsoring it for like probably like a decade, maybe even longer at this point anyway. But, what if like Churchill's, they just closed like 2 of their stores in the last couple years. So then you're talking like, what do you rename it? And, it's like how, like, obviously that's not a very good example because that's like a more established race. But like for like the mom and pop races that are just starting out, it's like, how can you really establish yourself if like your sponsorship backing might change every year, and you can't use the Brooklyn 5K. So I think like that's interesting from that standpoint, is it really limits newer races coming into the space name recognition wise. And that just might make it pretty difficult to, have races be a part of like this running boom that we've been having since post-COVID.
I can add some additional live research to this. So for anyone who wants to do this themselves in any trademark thing they could look up USPTO trademark. So it's the Patent and Trademark Association organization, and it's their trademark database. So you could search marks, and this also applies to like word marks, so just like phrases in themselves, like type, and then image marks, where you have logos associated as well. Now, to make this even more frustrating and interesting, there are 2 things I looked up. I looked up Brooklyn Half and I looked up Brooklyn Marathon. And things to note here, these are all word marks, so just letters. When I look up Brooklyn Half, the thing to note here is we have 2 trademark filings. One is for the goods and services of apparel. So being able to protect, like putting that on shirts, hats, whatever, socks. The other classification for this is for specifically organizing, arranging, and conducting running events. Now, the Brooklyn Half has a live and registered mark with New York Roadrunners. They own that. So if we look at this, the ability to organize a race and call it the Brooklyn Half is protected. Now, when we look at the apparel side of it that New York Roadrunners also applied for, it is being used, we know this, but it is pending and has not been approved. So looking at the filings of this, right, we have our approved mark for races, and that has been active and published as of 2017. So it's been in use and protected formally for a while. On the apparel side, it is currently pending the most recent status update of that awaiting. This is February 14th, 2024. So
It's pretty recent.
Yeah.
That's almost like 5 days before the filing of the complaint and the lawsuit.
Right. So, I mean, they can cite that, like, you know, that acquired distinction and what they've been doing, but I think this shows that the specificity of what a mark is tied to, it really matters, right? Because in the scope of, let's say, preventing the confusion of a customer, a race, an organization of a race is, let's say, higher stakes in terms of logistics and costs and all these things when you think about like the person who's registering versus buying a shirt. And that's potentially why things are not moving as quickly. Now, moving on to the Brooklyn Marathon, I think this is interesting for us to refer to as well. I'm pulling this up again. Brooklyn Marathon, there is equally a filing for the organization of sporting and athletic event services, and then there's another one for apparel, and a third one for Brooklyn Marathon and Half Marathon. All of those filings are from New York City runs. So,
and not NYRR.
Correct. Now, if we look into the Brooklyn Marathon filing that, let's see, has been awarded, this is like for the organization of races, this is published on March 3rd, 2015. So they've equally been using that for a long time. And it's been protected for a long time. On the Brooklyn Marathon and Half Marathon filing, that is pending. So this is kind of pulling in the half in the scope of what they're doing. And this is something that has been filed since 2022, and an opposition for the publication of the mark is currently sitting with the appeal board. So to sum that up is like when somebody files for a trademark and it's close or something to yours, you are notified. So New York Roadrunners would have been notified, and they have the ability to respond, and they submit evidence to them. And it's ultimately the filing of the PTO. So that's kind of like the long and short of what is really going on. So both have their own land grab, and where they're intersecting is the issue.
Would it be fair to say that there would be less litigation and probably less controversy if it was the NYRR established group that puts on New York City Marathon and so many other races, had their Brooklyn Half, and then there was a triathlon organization that had a half Ironman that they called Brooklyn Half, that wasn't just a half marathon, and they wouldn't be intersecting the exact same events? I imagine the thing that we're getting into is that when it is these sporting events right? Like the thing that I can maybe distill, and then also reading the complaint, it seems like they say the same thing like 50 times in a row, and they just keep saying it with slightly different verbiage. When it's an event, it's one thing. When it's a bunch of merchandise, like 75,000 people versus like 500,000 people over years, that's where it starts to get even more convoluted when it's, protecting apparel, protecting branding and all that stuff too. But the fact that it's two running races with the exact same name, that is what I also could distill versus calling it the same thing, but maybe being a triathlon. But then triathlon, they don't let you say half. They make you say 70.3. And that's a whole other thing that we can get into when we're on Run, Bike, Swim the show.
Well, if you think of the response they could make, and again, this is information, not advice. You can loosen up like.
I think he froze.
Oh, did I freeze?
You're good now.
Okay. So the way you could loosen the grip of this whole lawsuit is you could lean into it. You could potentially call this the other Brooklyn half, therefore not intersecting with one. It's still going to be tough, right? They're still going to get maybe like punched in the mouth in a legal proceeding, but that is a potential avenue. Another way to do this as well is leaning into an image mark. So saying like, well, this is the logo that we use, and this is the protected thing, and this is what like we really want to protect. It's still very much in dispute, but there are ways they can proceed from this without having to like slug it out in court. And also this will likely, if I have to guess, be settled outside of court because it's very expensive to go all the way through this, especially when both of them are going to be putting on races in the next month or two, right? It's going to get messy because the shirts are already printed, the materials are already done. So this will probably be some messy proceeding that could involve like paying somebody for the back, like the lost profits of whatever through 2024. And then this would be a change that would maybe take place in 2025. I don't know.
I am going to write in to the judge or magistrate or whatever fancy legal terms are and propose that the lawyers for either side have to race a half marathon and whoever wins gets the trademark. I feel like that would be sick. That would be really cool. Instead of
I would love that.
Going back and forth for days, just settle it over the course of 13.1 miles.
Yeah.
Emma, do you have any other concluding thoughts, or could you restate exactly what we said 5 more different ways? Because we have, it is so overlapping. Like the language is so similar for everything. But what other thoughts, I guess, do you have?
I mean, honestly, I think you guys covered it. Like it is, I do like the idea of the other Brooklyn half. I think they could just lean into it, like you said, Drew, and be a little cheeky with it. But yeah, I mean, it's confusing, right? Like you sign up for the Brooklyn half and then you're like, wait, what? Am I doing what? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Let's move on and talk about Josh Kerr and prize money at World Indoors. Emma, would you like to maybe give your recollection of the recent World Indoor Championships now that it's outdoor track season? I feel like we've moved so fast, but what do people need to know about this story?
Josh Kerr went and won. And won a bunch of money, but that's what we're going to discuss. Is it a bunch of money? So, and what does that mean for him? And I did think it was really, well, we can get more. I'll save that comment, what I was going to say, when we get a little bit more into the weeds. But it is interesting because, as I said many moons ago, is I am really interested in contract transparency. And going along with that is prize money transparency. So I do think it's really interesting that we actually got a snapshot of how much money Josh Kerr won for becoming a world indoor champion. And so, yeah, I am excited to get in the weeds about this.
Yeah. I will give, I guess, just some of the nitty gritty details, and then we can go over some of the hot takes and talk about why soccer and darts are involved in the conversation as well. So like Emma said, recently there was the World Indoor Track Championships. Josh Kerr won $40,000 this article says, for his storming victory at the World Indoor Championships in front of a home crowd in Glasgow. And the previous summer, he won $70,000 for winning the 1500 in Budapest. And this article highlights that it puts his prize money total for this indoor championship and the outdoor championship to a grand total of 86,700 pounds for becoming a double world champion. And this next sentence was kind of like the clickbait for all of these articles, was talking about darts. It is less than half of what the darts player Luke Littler, I have never heard of Luke Littler before this, received for reaching the world final at Alexandra Palace earlier this year, and less than the average Premier League footballer earns in a fortnight. Can you tell this is from a UK-based paper with all of the British words that they put in there? The main thing, I guess, to talk about, we talk about this all the time when we talk about pro athletes in the track and field space versus pro athletes in other sports, is that the salaries are really low. If we know any salaries, the prize money is really low. If we know any of the prize money, but to see direct comparison that every 2 weeks, kind of like the league minimum in the Premier League is more than what the best person in a single athletics event is able to make in a basically full season rotation in championship racing. And that, I feel like, is the thing to highlight. There's a second part of this article that goes directly into the next talking point, which is a proposed new track and field league that we know literally nothing about, and it's pure speculation and conjecture. Maybe the sort of guiding question and curiosity I have, Emma, is what would it look like, or what would the reasoning be to add more to the prize money pool? And could we see it as reasonable to take money away from the prize money pool at indoor championships? Like, is it in the right spot? Is it too little? Is it too much maybe for the attention that it's generated? Maybe that's somewhere to start, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and Drew's thoughts on the subject at large too.
Well, reading the article, it is interesting that Josh Kerr does touch on, I know one of our next roundtable topics, the Michael Johnson Track League, that you mentioned that we don't really know a whole lot about. And then he also had a little comment in there about the Live League, or LIV, Live League, and a la like Full Swing and what's going on with the PGA right now, which I thought was really interesting. I would say, yes, $40,000 is a bunch of money, like point blank. That's a bunch of money. Now, when you're talking about professional sports and you're talking about a world indoor champion, no, I don't think it's enough money. I would say if we are really talking about track and field on the grandest stage outside of the Olympics, the World Championships, and you're comparing it to other professional sports, obviously, just like in that article, a darts player, for just reaching the world final. No, I don't think it's enough money. I think it's almost like it's not enough money to be taken seriously. If that makes sense, where it's like, okay, if track and field really wants to become a more mainstream sport that people are flipping through the TV and are like, oh, World Indoor Championships are on? Awesome. Like, I'm going to watch this. And then it's like, oh, the winner's only taking home $40K. It's like, I mean, I was just talking about this with some friends last weekend where like reality TV shows where it's like the total prize take home is like $100K. It's like, I'm not really interested in that because people aren't going to do, crazy stuff for $100K. So yeah, I don't think, bottom line, I don't think it's enough money for a track and field championship, like a world indoor championship on that kind of stage. And it would be really interesting to actually have a bigger prize purse to incentivize more athletes to want to make it to that world championship stage. And then Josh Kerr goes on in this interview, this article, talking about wanting to race, the best guys in the world head to head. And I think, money talks. You put more money on the line, more people are going to want to be there and more people are going to be willing to race head to head. So that's my condensed soapbox about why there should be more money at World Indoor Championships, or really just World Championships in general, and at more of those prestigious track meets and road races, just to incentivize more people to vie for a spot to get there, to compete. And then obviously you're going to have more competitive races the more people you have vying for those spots to compete on that stage.
Can I throw a little bit of a wrench, or maybe like beg the question about this? I agree. I was also in the past week looking at everybody's favorite message boards, Let's Run, and there was a very obvious troll post, somebody just trying to stir up controversy for the sake of controversy, but it popped in my head while you were giving your explanation and reasoning, and I think, like, ironically, it kind of fits. The troll post was saying, I don't get why people go to the NCAA Indoor Championship and don't run fast. This is the best people. Why aren't they all going for a PR? And like, obviously then, like, it's supposed to get people to, like, it's supposed to bait them to say, like, it's a tactical race, da, 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 da. But it is maybe the question too of what is different about the World Indoor Athletics Championship than any other track meet you see on TV. For the outside of maybe like top 5 to 10% like closeness follower, there is nothing different. If you're just casually flipping through and you see it on TV, it looks like a track meet, knowing that it maybe is like the biggest meet to end the full season, like the indoor season. And then this article also goes on to highlight that in 2026, they want to make the Diamond League final the final. No more like World Athletics races after that. And that has a different sort of light at the end of the tunnel on the season, right? But for people on the starting line, there's a lot of reason in these World Athletics, like indoor athletics finals. There's a lot of reason for them to win. It means they get to retain their contract. It means that they win prize money, but I feel like people maybe wouldn't be incentivized as much because there's only a few small amount of people that can actually make these meets and make these finals. And it's basically Josh Kerr saying, I want to make more money for being a world champion. And having the prize money increase, like even if you double it, if you increase it 100 times, I don't think we're going to get that many other people stepping into the World Athletics finals. But I think that everybody should be paid more because there should be more money to go around and support athletes. Because the other thing, I guess, maybe in this is that there was that recent article about Josh Kerr hiring a team of 4 or 5 people to like manage everything for him so he could go like full serious into his buildup for this. And that costs a lot, right? And that's a lot of investment on his part. It also means that he gets the $40K and he has to like dole it right out to his full team. And Jakob Ingebrigtsen's contract means he doesn't have to worry about going to World Athletics meets and making sure he gets the prize money. I don't think that it means the prize money should stay the same. But I am curious as like what's different about a World Athletics final versus like getting the Citius Mag shout out before they go on to the like New Balance Indoor High School Grand Prix meet to post another shout out and stuff like that too. So maybe stirring a little bit of the pot and kind of asking for more justification on why it should be like even bigger than it is.
That's a fair question. I have to think about it. Drew, why don't you give your take and then I'll think about that a little more.
If I can say one thing really quickly, answering mine, it bothers the heck out of me asking that question because I know it's the right question to ask, but it makes me like uncomfortable to ask it because there's no immediate right answer to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you both that for someone to compete to show they're the best in the sport and to receive that payout, if you look at it in the scope of like percentage of what that person might be making from a salary perspective in their sponsorship, it is very significant, but that is it's a warped sense of, compensation, because that comp or percentage of compensation is dictated solely through sponsorship. It's not like the boxing model doesn't work because it's not like you get a win and show bonus as like part of being, in this title fight, if you will. And that percentage varies drastically from person to person who was on the line with Josh Kerr. So I think looking at it as a percentage of, dude, he doubled his whatever. No, I think that's insignificant, and it should not be the yardstick for this because there's no control. But this does, to me, show off a greater issue that's deep-seated in the sport. It's no surprise that, like, if we look at the darts model, right? And I won't go too far down this road, when we had Cool Hand Luke and Luke the Nuke go head-to-head in this darts tournament, the viewership for that on Sky Sports, which is a popular British big outlet for viewership, and they have a lot of sports on that, so probably similar to an NBC or an ESPN, they had 4.8 million people tune into this. And then they also, on top of this, they had the rights to globally live stream it on YouTube. Like I could have, and everybody here could have done it as well. So 4.8 is what Sky Sports reported, not even YouTube numbers. So and if you compare that to like Oregon 22 for World Championships, I just pulled up like the press release afterwards, and they reported that so in the final day of competition, which would be like the Josh Kerr event, right? They're building into over the course of several days. They said over the course of 10 days of competition in Oregon, they recorded a record 18.7 million total viewers on NBC Sports. Now, again, this does not include, global contracts or any other streaming services, but viewership peaked on the last day at 3.2 million. So still under what this darts event secured. I think people have talked very fondly about what darts has been able to do in taking like a bar sport and making it into a spectacle. There are certain things that just will never transfer well onto track and field, just in terms of like the bare bones of what they're doing. But I think if you pull out one thing from it, is the viewership for darts and the final from the previous year, from 23 to 24 or 22 to 23, went up 143%, according to that report. So it shows that somebody in management was willing to take the bet and to put resources in the direction of, hey, we're going to like, these people are going to make more money. We're going to place the bet and sign this contract, do it this way, make the event live this way, and essentially structure the entirety of that championship in a way that could have fallen flat for sure. But I think the main difference that I see in the sport is they were willing to take a bet. It paid off. Athletes for sport and for viewership and sponsored conceivably, and World Athletic or just track and field has nothing.
Interesting. A quick sidebar that is relevant information on the back of Josh Kerr talking about how much money he made. For Emma, have you had enough time maybe to think about a hot take response?
No, because it's a hard question, right?
We can revisit it, or maybe even do a quick soundbite on social. Yesterday in the parking lot of Tom Watson here in Boulder, Colorado, Ollie Hoare and Jordy Beamish finished their run and walked by the group of people I was standing in that had also finished their run, and people said, "Congrats." And how does it feel to be a world champion? And Jordy said, not that much different. I'm still shopping at Trader Joe's. So that maybe goes to show like how it doesn't actually move the needle that much. Although Yard Nagoo stood by a bright yellow, Mustang after having a really, really good season. So moves the needle some bits and pieces, but I am also sure that the whole thing like about contract transparency, winning 40K at a global championship is very different than winning 40K and then being able to go to your contract and get so much more from the brands you represent too. And that is something we just don't know. Like, we are not allowed to know. We can guess, but we have no idea about anything like that. But I'm sure Cool Hand Luke and what's the other, you said something, what's the other funny name?
Oh, Luke the Nuke and
Luke the Nuke. Yeah. I'm sure they can get on their freaking Twitter account and tweet like, I just made $5 million in contract bonus. P.S. Drink a Guinness or something like that, right? Like, yeah, that would be something that would be more welcome in the dart space.
Yeah, I guess if you draw some comparison, and this is the best transferable model either. So I think of like combat sports. The UFC has been notoriously like really buttoned up with their pay. They do not, their salaries that are leaked from a night and like pay-per-view points and stuff like that. I was lucky enough while I was working there to like actually see the contracts of like what win and show is for people, but they play it super close to the vest because they don't want this collective bargaining and that could think the whole thing. I imagine there is like the up and comer thing was like the bare knuckle fight championship, and they wanted to siphon off athletes by showing how much money they could make by coming over. So they had their athletes who came over being like, yeah, talk about what you're getting paid. All good. Do it. And people were openly in interviews being like, I finished my last fight in the UFC at like 5 figures, for example, and I just made $170,000 tonight just to walk in here. And I wonder, and this kind of like makes me think the Michael Johnson side of things, like, you're not going to have people in track and field disclosing what they make in their sponsorship contract, because that's a completely different endeavor, completely. But if people can be, if it's more obvious on day one of competition that you were fighting for a $50,000 prize purse or whatever, just for a day, like, that is enough to get people to be like, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see if there's going to be a similarity of like the young disruptor just being like, oh, I hate this, let's change it.
Interesting. Should we switch gears and touch on what we know about the Michael Johnson, like, speaking of keeping things very close to the chest, not really laying down any transparent information. Michael Johnson, former world record holder for 200 and 400 meters, famous gold shoes, very active in the track and field scene still, announced that with Winners Alliance, I have no idea what that is, but they want to create a fan-focused track league, which the thing that's popping up into my mind is the video of Justin Gatlin running on like a Chinese TV show with a giant fan, like a swamp fan behind him, and running like a 9.2 second 100. So fan focused, maybe they're just running like really fast with fan like assisting them. We don't know anything besides them saying during the final day of the World Indoor Championships, by the way, we want to start our own track and field league for all you people. So maybe this is overlapping exactly with what you were saying, Drew, of another league, like saying, hey, come on over, we'll give you money. We don't know how much money yet. It's 7 figures, but that could be 1 million. It could be $9.9 million. We have literally no clue. Emma, what is a must-have in a new fan-focused league for you if you're writing a letter to Michael Johnson?
Oh, this is tough because right off the bat, so my immediate reaction, my gut reaction was gambling and selling alcohol at the meets.
Sure. Yes.
So that's the gut reaction because, I mean, so when I was at the University of Toledo, that's when they made the switch from allowing non-alcoholic sales to alcoholic sales at football games, which I thought was really interesting. And at the time, being 21 years old, I didn't really think much of it. But now, as I'm older, I'm like, oh, I know why they did that, to make more money. That's interesting, and so, yeah, I think I'm not the first person to say that, I'm sure, about track and field, but if you want it to be fan focused, yeah, allow some bets to take place. Allow someone to sit in the stands and drink a beer while they're watching their favorite sprinter, storm down the home stretch. Why not? Let's make it fun. That's what stands out to me as fan focused.
The article also claims that this is the largest investment in track and field ever. And I feel like they're just like a bunch of these like little things that they can put in a press release, because the article also highlights that the USATF Nike deal was reportedly worth up to $500 million over X number of years. I love the gambling and the alcohol as fan focused. The article also talks about it wanting to be athlete focused, but not be in direct competition with the Diamond League and the proposed, again, calendar for professional track athletes ending at the Diamond League. I think it's a huge problem. If you asked any current college athlete who had a chance at going pro, what do they know about the Diamond League and the Diamond League structure and all the cities upcoming on the next year's circuit, they would not be able to tell you. As avid track fans, I don't think any three of us could complete the calendar, besides like pre-classic or Oslo, but sometimes that's not even
Doha.
Sure. It is good that they're not trying to be, they say as of right now, they're not trying to be in direct competition, but at the same time, the competition atmosphere is kind of broken because people follow when the meets are on, but they don't necessarily know how to follow along outside of that too. Drew, is there anything else that you would say is a must if you're writing your letter to former Baylor Bear Michael Johnson?
I would start by saying that I prefer this model like and field is so much more enticing than somebody being like, let's disrupt the norm by creating the enhanced games, right? Like that's not the solution, right? Where like they went the superhuman route without necessarily thinking of outcomes. So this model of disruption to me feels much more like fruitful in that regard. I
I think venue is going to be challenging, right? Like they have to pick the right places, whether it's a singular venue that will be doing this and they can invest fully into like fan experience because it's a single venue and they can control all of the variables of it. Or if it's a tour, right? We don't know any of this, but that's going to be a challenge. If you think of like, if somebody wants to go to all the Diamond League meets, how do you build a replicable fan experience from London to Oslo to Doha to whatever, right? From a quality standpoint and what to expect. That's interesting. If you want to think of like a fan-focused experience, but that could also relate to viewership. So sponsorship for me is something that's going to be also a challenge for that. I think the way that it's successful is having like looser broadcasting rights. So that way more platforms can pick this up, like being able to say, all right, we have a YouTube stream, or, not just having a singular streaming platform or channel to make this happen. That's going to be important. And then also my personal preference is that there is no title apparel sponsor. I think that's so important. Like World Athletics has an ASIC sponsorship, and that can dictate what is presented and all of this stuff. The same thing goes for USATF and Nike. So since those things are tight, it's very restrictive in a already restrictive model. If they focus their partnerships on like auxiliary, let's think of like F1, you have Oracle, you have, Google, right? These are deep pockets outside of the sport entirely who want feature during these events. I think that's the way you make this sustainable, and you guarantee payouts that are better than other things without restricting athletes. So that's my wish list. I don't think that's going to be something that they're going to be able to do from day one, conceivably, to get like an Oracle or a Salesforce or somebody who's like deep pockets. But that is on my street plan. If I'm on the team, how do we go where?
My early bingo card for things that I'm pretty much expecting that they're going to do outside of the alcohol sales. They are for sure going to try to launch some virtual reality component and like put you inside the race, which I feel like could be done well. I hope fan focused means that they're going to pick somebody random out of the crowd and put them on the track to race against people. Because that's like a very common Twitter like thing that goes around maybe once every 4 months is like, whatever, just put a random person in the Olympics so I can see how they compare. I feel it in my bones that they're going to do some sort of, for the first time ever, virtual reality incorporated in track and field, or making it actually fan focused and bringing somebody like in. I feel like a VR or augmented reality or different streaming option could go over well, but I really like the no broadcast exclusivity and people live streaming it on like a TikTok live or YouTube, or making it easy to follow is the trade-off you get by not signing a broadcast exclusivity rights when you get a shit ton of investment up front. That's the whole point, that you don't have to recoup standard revenue streams. You have your boatload of cash that you try to burn as fast as possible so you can get even more. And that is almost a leg up that they have versus something. I am curious if you guys remember the American Track League from within the past 4 to 8 years and how that absolutely disintegrated after a little bit. This eerily reminds me of that, and I hope that it is not. I hope that it's similar in ways, but I hope that it is not similar in ways too. Any other closing thoughts on the proposed track league that we have no idea what it will be called besides Michael Johnson Winter Alliance Track League?
Is that that's
I think so. Let's check the soft trademark thing so we can come up with our exactly same name one.
All right, so you go ahead. I'll do quick research.
My only closing thought is I'm curious if this is going to go the way of professional golf with Live, where it's like, okay, guess what? We have another league and we're going to get people to come on over. And then they just end up, well, I think technically they won't use the phrase merge. But, you know, I think legally they can't say merge. But I'm curious if that is something that it would be this Michael Johnson track league and the Diamond League under one umbrella if the Michael Johnson Alliance, Winners Alliance track league for the cure, gets underway and becomes successful. I would be very curious to see if, in the next, well, I don't know, because the PGA and the Live deal went through pretty quickly. That was just like a couple years that it took for that to go under one umbrella. So anyway, that just reminded me of that a lot, where I was like, I wonder if that, came up in the discussions. If that's not part of the idea, I would just be very curious.
And then the percent likelihood chance that a billion copycat leagues pop up if this has one successful season, I think is probably 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody will want to get under the same umbrella, not merge, because it's not a merger, but same umbrella. Drew, did you find any reliable information to go off of?
I don't have any marks that are live right now.
So there's still time for us.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I was so curious about the name is like, I think generally, and this is an aside that we don't have to get into, but I think like there's a trend of founder-led businesses being successful just as a generic thing, right? And founders could be like, they can also be influencers, they could be athletes, and it's we've kind of moved away from that in recent years, and it seems like there's more momentum for this like authenticity movement for the founder to be a focal point. So I think this definitely, like, we can say cost and benefit analysis of like naming it Michael Johnson's track league, right? Because then you have the legitimacy of like his own career, but in a specific, discipline where like, is this going to be as obvious to people that they would find throws and jumps in it? Or is that not very interesting? Called it anything American, whatever, right? Like you have this like, why is this athlete GB going up? Naming as a concept is such a double-edged sword. I'm very curious to see how they get on top of that.
Mm-hmm. We have two more quick subjects to cover. The first is that the French government is going to pay bonuses during the Paris Olympics, and they're going to pay between 500 to 1,500 euros in addition to the salaries, not of the athletes, but of the people working in Paris during the Olympics, to say, please do not strike. Can I just get some hot takes from you guys, I guess, or just quick reactions? It doesn't have to be a hot take, but quick reactions to hearing the news. Emma, can you go first?
People are going to take the money and strike.
Of course.
Yeah, I read that and was like, all right. I mean,
are they going to get the money first, or like in allotments, or is it like, hey, please don't strike, and if you don't strike and we have proof of you not striking, we'll give you the money afterwards? But then, oh no, we had budget cuts, so now we can't give you this stuff, so they strike afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I don't know, because right, we know that every time a city hosts an Olympic event, that they build these grand stadiums, and then there's always pushback because obviously there's inequality everywhere. But then, it's like, why aren't you using this money to build up infrastructure for our lower income, citizens here? I could go way in depth with that. And so, there's always going to be that sort of, or that conversation that takes place. So I think it's interesting that they're like, oh, we'll pay you to smooth out, all of the potential ruckus that could happen from having us host this huge event in our city, where maybe not all the citizens were on board with having this huge event in their city because of said reasons, you know, economic impacts at play, you know, and then, yeah, I just think it's really interesting that it's like, it's like, okay, we'll see how that goes over. I mean, like 500 euros is like $550 US, like $550. So it's certainly not nothing. Like, it's a good chunk of change for sure. Up to 1,500 euros, you said? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just think, I don't know. I mean, it's like, how much money would you be willing to take to, you know, stand down against something you feel really strongly about?
Mm-hmm. This, like, some important context is that a month ago, employees at the Eiffel Tower they went on strike for 6 days. So they wanted salary increases, better maintenance, better resources. The last quote in this article from the Minister of Transformation and Public Administration says that the whole country wants to avoid strikes during the Olympic Games. The Games have to be a success for the whole nation. And so I think that they probably feel pretty desperate to ensure that there's no civil unrest as much as they can control for civil servants. It's important to have hospital workers not striking during big, like, influxes like this. But at the same time, Emma, like you said, we could go into a second full hour discussing this of the government providing social services and being able to invest in the people should be a regular thing, and it's really being put under a magnifying glass and being highlighted because there's a freaking article about it months before the Olympic Games even start. It's a super important topic, but it is something I think that we probably don't think about outside of the Olympic Games coming to these cities once every 4 years, every 2 years, if you like the Winter Olympics. Drew, any remarks on that as well?
One is no one knows how to strike like the French. If we've seen any of the strikes that the farmers have enacted in recent history, my goodness, and we're not even talking about like historic strike that the French have done. The point of curiosity for me is in recent memory, it's like the assumption I'll make as well is like, this is one of the first summer games that I can remember that didn't require a ton of infrastructural, like, we need to build a stadium, we need to build this facility, right? Where in Rio is probably the best example of this in recent history of like having to completely overhaul areas. I mean, the World Cup has come under fire for the same thing, building something from nothing. I wonder if in the allotment that the Olympic Committee has from a dollars perspective, they're like, well, we don't need to build the facility, but we need to make sure it's staffed appropriately. So just do it. Like, here's money, French government, you handle the rest. And that extension of that curiosity is, depending on how this goes, I think we would see a similar thing in LA 2028 with perhaps we won't require all of the facilities to be made from scratch, and it'll be more focused on like staffing the experience appropriately and probably like housing as well. But yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. Speaking of workers at the Eiffel Tower going on strike for 6 days, Lululemon just hosted a 6-day event called Further. They were on social media for what seemed like absolutely forever. And over the course of 6 days, 10 women ran further than they'd ever run before. This was highlighting some new shoes from Lululemon and new apparel and future research to come. Again, 10 athletes that everybody had some experience with running. People had varied backgrounds. Probably the performance highlight that a lot of people maybe saw was Camille Herron running multiple world records, world bests for duration covered over a certain time period or distance covered over a certain duration. What sort of quick takes do y'all have from Lululemon's further? We talked about this a little bit off recording before we started, just while we were catching up about stuff. I will give my quick piece of, I thought that casting as wide of a net as 10 runners who seemed to be from different countries was very smart because they were highly influential people. I had only followed Camille Herron and seen people posting about her running. And then after the, like, if you follow Camille Herron, you know that she does like 24-hour and 48-hour runs, like not infrequently. And so I thought on first look, this was one of those. Then by day 3, I was like, wait, what's going on? And I feel like that duration being stretched out captures the attention outside of kind of the norm. Afterwards, looking and seeing that they are publishing research gathered during this, that piques my interest. Other than that, I don't feel like, and this is brutal honesty, I don't feel more motivated to buy a Lululemon shoe or check out the apparel. I will still walk into the Lululemon store and do a quick lap and be too intimidated to ask an employee if I can try on one of the pants that I've heard are really, really good for the past couple of years. But I don't think the shoe moved the needle for me in terms of seeing that it was that durable. Drew, what about your quick takes or thoughts on the Lululemon further?
Yeah, I'll start off by listing the records that Camille hit, with her being like let's say the focal point from like peak of this event. 300-mile world record, 400-mile world record, 500-mile world record, 500K world record, 600K world record, 700K world record, 800K world record, 900K world record, 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, and 6-day world record, all within this event. Honestly, like taking all of these world records, just cramming it down your throat is what Camille did. And like you said, just it speaks to who Camille is as an athlete. Yeah, so this is an interesting one to see for me because this was a massive undertaking of cost from a brand perspective. And I think if you view this as like a brand focused mission, right? They were able to marry the athletes, the product, the brand itself and what they stand for, and they created the arena for it. They didn't have to like go on the back of any other competition. They controlled the elements. It kind of reminds me of the Hoka event to launch the Rocket X, I believe. Carbon X, you're right. So it was super ambitious for sure. The thing that's a little bit of a thing that I'm still trying to mull over personally is this was an event that featured new shoes, new apparel, and new research. It was very ambitious, trying to do everything, all things at once. And although it was maybe cost effective to roll all of those elements into one event, I wonder if that research is, I hope this is the tip of the iceberg or like the tip of the spear for what research they do. I just don't know the value of that research in this environment for 6 days only right now. I don't know how this 6-day event is going to truly impact the role of their footwear development and apparel development. But putting those things on display and naming it for what it is does kind of send a shot across the bow of like the 3 brands that are all fighting for this like capital I innovation seat at the table, right? It's Nike, it's On, Hoka, are all like beating each other over who created the best stuff. Doing something like that while massively expensive is the potential disruptor to those 3 to say, hey, we're here too, because there's no other brands who are doing something like this. I just hope it pays off for them.
for sure. Emma, what were your takes? And I know how you said you followed along, but I'm curious to know how you followed along. And then Drew, actually, could you say maybe where you saw it too? Because I feel like we probably all saw it from slightly different avenues, and I feel like that shaped stuff.
The two main places I consumed it was Instagram through the channels, like through Lulu's channels. It was coming up in my Explore feed often. And they really pulled a ton of athletes into the mix. Like Emma, you mentioned Nikki, like they were out there just producing content. Tara Davis Woodall was there. Matt James was there, right? So they pulled all of the people in their network into the space, not to compete and not to support athletically, but just be there and make content. So Instagram and TikTok were the main.
Interesting. And then Ella, your thoughts and how you followed along.
Yeah. So, as Drew mentioned, same thing here. I honestly did not know it was taking place. But because I follow Nikki Hiltz, they were posting a bunch. I was like, what is going on here? And so my lens was solely through their Instagram and Nikki posting stories while they were out there. And it was very much like, I was like, what is going on? It's like a big party, but Camille is running all these laps. And so I looked more into it. This is probably a hot take. My gut reaction, hot take, was, oh, I wonder if they did this because they came under fire for diversity earlier this year. But when looking at it a little bit more, I'm like, obviously this project was in the works way before the founder made those comments earlier this year. Was it this year or the end of last year? Either way, the founder had made some pretty disparaging comments about diversity and inclusion. But obviously looking at that a little deeper, I'm like, there's no way that they planned and created this whole event in 3 months. So it was like, obviously this was in the works long before that. So I was like, well, I guess the timing on it, so that was my hot take. But I did think it's really interesting, right? Did it make me want to buy a pair of their shoes? No. Did I look at the shoes? Yes. But I wasn't sold on the idea of like, oh man, like Camille, like, oh wow, she hit all those records. Like, I better go buy a pair of Blissfield 2s right now. So no, it didn't really make me want to purchase anything from Lululemon. But I do really like the research component of it. And as Evan mentioned off mic before we started, the research portion is kind of buried on the website. It's like the fourth thing that they mention in the pull down tab on the website. But I actually thought that was probably the most interesting aspect of it, because they were talking about, how do women, or actually I should pull up the actual question before I butcher it. But they said they were asking, let's see here, questions like, do female ultra runners have more fatigue resistance? What are the physiological limits of female energy expenditure? Super interesting. Obviously, having 10 women, it's going to be a bigger study. It's going to take years. But I do like that they're posing those questions. It surprises me that a brand like Lulu would do that because they are so new in the footwear space. It did give me a little bit of Nike Dreamweaver vibes, in terms of research and innovation, which is why I mentioned that this is going to be years in the making if they do really take a hold of this and run with it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm all for, more research and innovation in women's running for sure. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see how it's all going to play out. So, but yeah, my hot take was like, I saw the founder's comments. I know what you guys are doing. But yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool. And it was really cool. Obviously, I love following Nikki. So it was very cool to see it from their lens.
I would, to a hot take that goes along with what you were saying, Emma, is like, if you view this as a brand activation, it is vastly more successful than a product focused whatever. Because if you look at the product itself, right, they put a cool upper on it with the design, and like the apparel definitely looked interesting, right? A departure from what they do. But the shoe itself did not necessarily like turn heads, because it's a trail version of what they already put out. So slightly different outsole, maybe a different midsole. It's hard to tell from this. If you view it as a brand mission, this is their opportunity to show you and to show the other brands that like they care about developing products and solutions and research and just supporting female athletes in a way that Dreamweavers had a blip on the radar by saying, hey, by the way, we supported a bunch of athletes going into the trials, but not like owning it in a big moment. So they're kind of sending the shot across the bow for Nike to say like, no, women's peak performance is ours. And it's also a way, I mean, think about the other player in the space. They just dunked on Oiselle, because Oiselle would be their player in the face to own peak performance for like women's development. Obviously, it's like a gun and a knife fight because the funding they have is wildly different, but they had the opportunity just to make sure that Oiselle never gets in that conversation. And before they have the chance to respond, they outpaid for every single thing that they accomplished. Same thing with like, hey, Hoka, we are the women's brand, right? So I think it does kind of contradict them putting a men's shoe recently. It's like, oh, let's scratch, no, for another. But this was a end moment that got to in that more than a product innovation side.
It is interesting you say that, because one of the athletes in the Lululemon further event was Devin Yanko, and she is formerly a Oiselle and Hoka athlete. So I find those sort of comments probably intentional. I am also going to bring out my bingo card here for calling the advertising campaign that will be a drip campaign from this, which will focus kind of exactly the point you said, Drew, but phrasing it differently. This was an activation, and this is not about the product. It is about the athlete. And I think that is what Lululemon wants to get at, is that like they're showing their shoe will go with you. We had a world record holder, like, set multiple more world records in the shoe. It's just as good, but it's about you as the athlete, because I think it was everybody during this 6-week period or 6-day period ran more than they have run in 6 days before. And being able to highlight, I can just see, and I can already feel a little bit of chills of somebody who's never run a 100-mile week. I saw I think the least number of miles somebody ran was in like the 150 to 160 range. And that is immense. And to feel that satisfaction of never doing something like that before, probably being an athlete that is semi-influencer, competitive athlete, to go out and probably have some question marks about the product that they're going to run, supposedly the furthest they're ever going to run up until that point in their life. That is going to be a really cool 15-second bumper ad to see of somebody like crossing the finish line with pure excitement and pure joy. And that's the stuff I love. And it is about the athlete. And I think that's probably on the nose for Lululemon, but then it is a almost priming thing for when they do launch into performance footwear and they have the performance side. There's already some sort of legitimacy to, oh yeah, they have people that run world records in their shoes all the time. And I can see the steps happening to that, but I really just want that pure excitement of somebody crossing the finish line after 6 days injected into my veins, because I just love to eat that stuff up. Any other parting thoughts on Lululemon's further event or anything else we talked about in this roundtable?
No, I don't think so. I don't have anything. I think we covered a lot.
We covered so much. If people listened all the way through, please let us know your thoughts. You can send us a direct message on Instagram, and Drew will be able to read it and then relay it to us if it is tasteful enough to relay. Otherwise, we'll be back with another episode pretty soon. Drew, do you have anything about the Netflix series coming up in the pipeline in the next little bit?
Yeah, we're at a place now after doing research and factual information and before the series debuts, we're focusing on the subject matter experts, so interviewing folk who can let in perspective to the conversation, just kind of identify blind spots that I have for example research. So professional athletes, videographers, storytellers, photographers. I mean, we'd love to really keep this lens super wide and invite these folks who know what they're doing to kind of give what they think about it.
For sure. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back with another roundtable episode soon. See you then. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Running the Show's Roundtable of March. We'll be back next month in April to explore what new things are going on that interest us as well. In the meantime, though, if you like what you hear, like the analysis, or just curious about what we have to talk about, we do have a series going on exploring this docuseries that Netflix is making on track and field. So those episodes are coming out each month. Stay tuned for those. And in the meantime, like, comment, subscribe, recommend to a friend. We appreciate it all. Thanks again, and we'll join you soon.